I'll start with approval for an amended agenda. So the amendment to what you have in front of you would be that we have already had a staff update. So that won't be how we move forward, but everything else should be as it was good. So I'll entertain a motion to approve this agenda.
Motion to approve the amended agenda.
Thank you. Second by Anthony. All those in favor, please audibly say aye. Any opposition? Very good. I also, rather late, but still, sent out the minutes from the December meeting. Apologies of us being so late. There's not a ton that was left in there to discuss because we took a good chunk of that time to meet that. So the front end portion was really, Councilmember Jones bringing some issues to us that we got to discuss a little bit. And then we had a presentation on the comp plan as well. So not a ton of discussion, but there are some things that will carry over from old business that we'll talk about today. But if there are any amendments to those minutes. Yeah. We're looking at amendments to December minutes. If there are none, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes as they are.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as the December minutes.
Approved by Trey.
Second.
Second. Any discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes as they are, please probably say aye. Any opposition? Now to wake up. Really bored.
Just close that.
I'm waiting for Cortico. Cortico's gonna be my blood.
Water, coffee, pastries, if you need a sugar rush or some caffeine. Okay, moving into public comment. Anyone present for public comment? Press on. Councilmember Jones, Happy New Year. Welcome back. Have you had one session for council since the break, or have you not?
Yesterday.
We had yesterday and since the break, we had 2 sessions total as the new council,
Okay.
but once in the break, yeah.
Oh, because the December one was the third.
Right, December 3rd was the first one.
Anyway, it's not my presentation.
We had the shortest meeting on record yesterday. It was about an hour and a half.
No.
Our council meeting. Let me tell you, that's just the first one. Then we had the public hearing and we had 3 cases and we had 21 minutes was how long we were in for the public hearing.
Wow.
What?
That's gotta be a
It was
record.
great. We had 2, it was an annexation and a rezoning for Habitat for Humanity, trying to bring affordable home ownership to residents. And it was a rezoning up in District B. So it was an very easy yes. So that's why it sped through, but I've never been out that early from either of the meetings. So it won't ever happen again.
It's 2025. 2025.
But it was great. It was great. I just want to bring some things that have been going on as we enter a new council and we were learning new priorities, and just the chatter and what we were talking about behind the scenes, maybe not at the table. When we have our council retreat, it's going to be the 24th and 25th of January. We don't have a location yet, so be on the lookout for the location. They are 2 full days, so 8 hours. They'll probably be from like 9 to 5 both days. But the reason why I'm bringing it to you guys is one of the topics that council is discussing right now as we plan it is boards and commissions. What we have heard from the experience of me, all of us going to boards and commissions, is that there is a consistent not understanding what the purpose is. How am I helping? And I hope to have a really robust conversation about that at the retreat. So please be present, maybe not physically present, but just listen in on it, whether that's in a recording or watching live stream, so that you can see how we're feeling. We're a new council. We haven't defined that yet. But I have some ideas that I've been talking to other boards. I had my other board meetings today, that I just want to make sure you understand what I am going to say as your representative, know what I'm going to be pushing for, and really get your feedback. What do you think? Do you think this is good or bad? So in hearing from multiple boards and commissions that there's just this not feeling fulfilled, not feeling like I'm part of it and that my decision, we only talk to you guys during work plans, really. And then other than me being present these once a month, not every board has that. You know, not every counselor is that present. So there is a inconsistency of expectation. But I think, and if I get too abstract, let me know. But in a perfect world, in my perfect world, community engagement board would be the first landing place for everyone. What that means, though, is that you have a connection to every board, every other board and commission, that you have a connection to staff and in every department, so that when my community members say, hey, I need help, and I can just say, go to your community engagement board, they're going to guide you wherever you need to go. That's the ultimate goal. The problem that I have seen in that with the rollout of it is that we never gave it that direction. We never said, hey, that's what we want you to do, because there wasn't a unified voice. Hopefully at this retreat, I can push for that, because it's not like you can turn flip a switch. I can't say, oh, now you're a great new board member here. You now have a download file that you now know everything, because you don't. You have to learn it. And I think what we failed at as a council is really putting that trajectory out. You know, what does the first 5 years look like? What is the next, how are we? And so what I believe has resulted is this frustration of like, I don't know the information to share, nor do I know who to share it with. And you guys aren't getting guidance on that. So if we had this structure to where you guys are like the overarching board over the other boards and helping maintain that communication and understanding, what I would ask is that part of your mission would be to host a yearly event for boards and commissions. In theory, in my abstract thought about it, it would be where at like the McKimmon Center, and every board would do their work plans all together in their own separate rooms. And then you guys would be in charge of saying, okay, let's come together. And from the council retreat, here are 5 initiatives this year that the council is working on. Those, for example, BRT or the crisis response unit or whatnot. And then as a collective, the board decide, which one do I want to focus on? Meaning that you're going to have multiple boards on an initiative, which is great for fostering communication and understanding and cross-pollinating. And then that would be what comes to council. So if it's the crisis response unit and I have human relations commission on it, I've got substance use advisory board on it, and I say, okay, in May, I need a report. What are you finding out? How have you learned to push this issue forward? Then all the boards come to that meeting, to that work session, and we have that discussion. And so we're guaranteed at least 5 initiatives of what we would do. What I believe that brings to you guys is an understanding of how you are impacting policy, current policy, not just let's review bylaws from 10 years ago and consistently update them, but hey, BRT, this is the 3rd time we're sending it out for bid. Nobody wants to build their BRT. And how's that affecting the transit authority? How's that affecting our mayor's committee with those with disabilities? How does that happen? And if we had a group of advisory boards that were committed to that issue, we could get consistent updates. So that's abstract. It's only a few days old, but I've been like, oh, this is how I think I can incorporate what I've heard as concerns into constructive and buildable foundation for the future. So that's just a brief brain dump on what I plan to bring to council as we think about the topic of boards and commissions. Yes.
As you think about this, can you please consider?
I'm sorry.
Can you please consider the time commitment that you're asking from board members and folks that are volunteering their time? Because I do feel like there's and I've heard other folks with a lot of really good plans, and I sit there and I go, yeah, who has the time? This is something we are doing for
sure.
zero anything other than to support our communities and help. And I want to make sure that as we think about these things and they become more elaborate, there is a space in which it is accomplishable by everyone or anyone. It's not something that becomes the exclusive realm of those with the privilege of enough time or post-retirement. You can build a program that is very exclusionary very quickly by asking for more than, a lot of us can give.
I can definitely receive that feedback 100%. And thank you for that. What I will go back to and push back with is that, first of all, this is the discussion phase. So this is great that we're getting this and I can make sure to incorporate that into the conversation. But I wouldn't push for more time commitment. It's just the focus of what the discussion is. It's not to say, oh, as this over now community engagement board, you have to be there every single week and you need to do that. No, because I'm not asking you to solve the problems in a year. I'm not asking anyone to make Raleigh perfect. I'm asking for incremental change. So that's why the initiatives, to help gauge those initiatives, will really put that focus. It doesn't take away your work plan, because your work plan is uniquely you. That is what, in my opinion, that's what you guys bring and say, hey, we can help on an overall scale. So I would see that you have a work plan and then help with these initiatives that council has directed you to do on a yearly basis. And I don't think any of those initiatives would be looked at for perfection. We're nowhere near being able to fully launch our alternative response unit. So your expectation wouldn't be to completely finish it, but it could be measurable goals and what we can commit. So that line of communication, I will make sure is always open, because I don't ever want it to be exclusionary. But what I heard from everybody as I'm going into these board meetings is this feeling of not there. Like, we're doing this in silos and I'm doing some community, but how am I touching other boards? How am I touching the issues of today? And this is my opinion. This is only what I'm going to present at council so that you're aware of it, and then other councilors are going to throw their ideas in too. So it's not just going to be blanketly my idea. And hopefully it'll grow from there. It'll get better, but thank you for that.
Three things quickly. One, in addition to just consideration, like understanding this is just like a thought phase, is the amount of sort of authority that is given to something like community board in this process, because there's so much we can do, but it's really recommendations that you can or cannot take. And I feel like the easiest way to deter people from being part of a board or commission is to ask them for their time, expertise, opinions, and then it'd be disregarded.
Mhm.
So whatever amount of
Yeah.
follow through we have in that,
Yeah.
again, just for
Yeah,
food for thought
for
to throw out there. One thing I know that you'll push for too is council's definition of the purpose of boards and commissions, not just individual ones and like what the relation is, but why do they exist? I just looked on the website and there's not any clarity about that. And then the third thing, if there's a way for us to be part of that conversation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be during the retreat, but like before or after, is there something that we as the specific board can contribute to for that conversation?
For the boards and commission conversation
Yeah.
prior to the retreat or after?
Or
the
after,
retreat?
I mean, whatever would make the most sense.
Yeah, I think because this is just something I heard yesterday. Remember, yesterday was our first meeting, so I don't know that this is going to be the final agenda. I just know that it was discussed
Okay.
in the committee that's creating the agenda. And so as soon as I hear, I will definitely make that point. I don't know that whenever I hear, even if I heard tomorrow, if there's enough time to make that happen prior to the retreat. So I would say really shoot for the after the retreat and making that touch point, because it's not going to be decided. There's no votes at the retreat. But let's say my idea, everyone loves it and they're like, that's what we're going to do, which selfishly, I hope it's gonna happen. But it's not guaranteed. If that happens, there's a rollout period. How do we define that? Because that's where I'm hearing from what you're saying. We have the opportunity to say, okay, if we want to put this kind of thing on a board, let's have a conversation with them as a group and bring them and have a work session, So I will definitely push for that if that's the way that the council would like to go.
Yeah.
More than likely, it's going to be picked apart it's 48 hours old idea, so I'm sure there are flaws in it. And they're gonna be able to put, their own spin on it that might be look something completely different, but work just as well, if not better. So I just wanted to make sure you knew what I was bringing to that conversation as your liaison, and make sure that overall, it's never going to be what we think right now, no matter what, it's going to change over time. So just want to make sure that your voice feels incorporated, that these are the concerns that you really expressed, and that while we don't know the end solution yet, that this is feeling like a step forward as we get to that solution. So that's really what I'd love to make sure that I'm representing as I speak about it at the retreat for you on your behalf.
Thank you for bringing that to them at the retreat. I know we talked about wanting to do something similar just as a board, but it's nice to have that taken on a the initiative on another side for.
Yeah, because I hear you. I hear that concern and I don't, in your board, but in every single board, we only meet you guys for work plans and it's a presentation approval and you're gone. And unless every counselor was required to do this, even that, we don't transmit all of the information in a public setting. You know, I may talk to counselors behind the scene about what we've discussed, but I don't always, there's no place on the agenda to do a report. So how does the community know what you guys are working, even though I am here every month? I don't know. So those are also issues that have to be worked out. But that's that'll be part of the conversation. So do that. We have our budget sessions. If you have not made it, there's one right after your meeting here for District E, but then there's also 3 more. This week it's your last district opportunity. You can go to any district, even if you live in A and you want to go to B, it's fine. Please be part of it. This is a huge process. And we increased taxes by 25% last year. So let's make sure that you feel we are using those tax dollars wisely. That part is your responsibility to make sure you're participating as well, so that we know that prior to that taking effect. Because we heard from a lot of people after they got that bill, and I was like, there's nothing I can do for you right now. So make sure to be there. And then also, Human Relations Commission had the Racial Day of Healing. I'm sorry, the Day of Racial Healing, my bad. And I have a member from the Human Relations Commission. Can you remind me the date?
Tuesday the 21st,
Tuesday, the 21st, at what time?
6 o'clock.
6 p.m. at Chavis. So that is one hosted by our Human Relations Commission, and would love to see anyone who can participate. January 21st. Yeah, Chavis, 6 to 8. If there's
And
no,
asking for a registration, it's not required, but I think it's just good to kind of get the.
so they have, yeah, in case they want to provide snacks.
Oh, welcome back.
And we love you for it.
Awesome. So if there's nothing else, thank you so much. I'll be here till probably around 5:30 when I'm going to head over to that budget session. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, friends. We are moving forward. So no surprise, we are neck deep in, this relationship planning, what the future of, our community conversations, soon to be renamed, process is gonna be with Portico. We've already presented our work plan to council, which includes this AI component, which we very vaguely discussed, but the intention of it is to work with Portico. And I know some of us have had like very direct contact or understanding, whether it was sitting in the, outreach committees, sort of one-on-one session where they talked about Durham, where we kind of first got the idea. Some of you have never really interacted with it at all. Some may have questions about what the capability of Portico is, and how we intend to use it. This is the time to ask all those questions. So we've not had anyone in person to discuss. We do either kind of virtual or we kind of workshop their audience. Give them your heart.
And Stacy, let me just say, we have Alex Berman here. She is virtual.
Hi, Alex.
Yeah.
But the real.
And we have, we have Marina from the city's IT department
Yes,
as
yeah.
well.
So hopefully you came with questions as we work through. Again, we have an understanding of what we want to do, but they're the ones that are going to help us do that. So those questions. And then in conjunction with that, big component of where we are in that process with finalizing everything is the IT portion. So Marina is the new Chief Information Security Officer for the city, which they have been working as well to make sure that Portico is compatible with the requirements for what the city needs. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves first.
I'm gonna turn Alex around.
Alex.
Obviously, we don't have a screen in this room. This is the art center, so.
All right. Well, it's actually kind of a relief that I'm not like blown up big on a screen, to be honest. I was kind of imagining that. I'm Kelly Bowman. Oh, I can hear myself echo. I wonder if there's
Let me see.
Is it next?
Is it coming up?
Next
The
is
L
the L.
and the.
I think so.
And I'm sure we
All right.
All right, try it now.
all right. Oh, perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. Yep. It's great to meet you all. I wish I was there in person. I'm actually here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we're based out of the MIT Media Lab. But I live in Maplewood, New Jersey, so I'm working remotely right now. But yeah, I've been with Cortico for 5 years. I worked with 220 partners on recorded conversation projects. And I have a background personally in oral history. So there's a lot of my work that is connected to listening deeply to people's stories and recording them, keyword recording, and then thinking about how to make sure that those stories are accessible beyond the moment when they're shared. And that's exactly what I still do at Cortico. We introduce group recorded conversations. We feel like that really helps to meet people where they're at a little bit more, introduce questions that are open-ended, inspire people to share personal experiences, and then take that sharing one step beyond into what we call sense making, which is a down-to-earth qualitative analysis that anyone and everyone can participate in using AI supports. And when I say AI, I know some of you, I definitely think this way too, are probably thinking like more efficient, like push a button, like you get what you need. We actually are introducing AI in a little bit of a different way. So it's as an assist to human listening and leadership. So this is part of our sense-making process that brings in AI to support efficiency, but it's not just AI. AI is working in collaboration with real people to do the sense-making process. And then at the other end, we introduce outputs that are centered around the voice. And I know that this is sometimes, for a lot of our partners, they shy away from collecting stories in their work, even though they want to, because what do you do with them afterwards? It's much easier to collect survey data, to put it in the pie charts and the bar graphs. But we run straight into that complexity, collecting those stories and introducing outputs to our partners that help to capture the nuance and the richness of those stories, as well as the breadth of them. I sometimes call it the story of the stories. So we work on outputs like audio medleys, strings of highlights around powerful themes that are being shared across a set of conversations. Another output that I'm sure you've all seen from the Durham project is what we call a portal, which is an interactive repository where you can really search through highlights from conversations based on what you might be interested in finding out more about. And that could look different for some of you versus community partners who you work with versus just anyone from the public who might be interested in listening to the stories. We find it's a really powerful proof of concept. You're doing the listening and here it is shared back with you and let's all learn from it. So that's my very quick snapshot, what we do. And I looked over your plan, the slides that you shared, and I think it looks great. I have a couple of questions. I don't know if now is the best time to share those questions. Nadia and Dale can guide me, but that's my introduction.
You want to take questions?
Might wait just a second.
Okay.
What is her last name? It's Alex
Berman.
Berman.
Yes.
I think it might be helpful, Marina, if you don't mind jumping in and just giving us a perspective of how all that you just heard sounds and how that plays into what the city needs from us as well.
Happy to do so. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with the Public Engagement Board. Engagement is a huge component of what our team does with our employees, our residents, and our partners in various spaces. So really appreciate it. So I'll pass these around. These my business card. If you all ever have any questions, please let me know. So I'll start with saying that my team's job, so I am the head of the information security team for the city of Raleigh, and our job I stole this tagline from one of our vendors. Our job is to be the Department of No, KNOW,
Okay.
not no, NO. So our job is not to stop anything from happening in the city from a business perspective. Our job is to help make sure that our stakeholders, including the Community Engagement Board, are aware of all aspects of security and risk that comes with various vendors in their spaces. And so we have been working closely with the project management office, business relationship managers for the city to look at Cortico, because Cortico is, thank you, a very brand new technology. It is a cutting edge technology, and I think Alex would agree with that.
Alex is nodding, just so very.
Yes. And so when we have that situation from an information security perspective, then that gives us a little more pause of understanding the impact. We want to make sure that we are protecting the data of our residents, employees, and partners. And so when we look at a technology like Cortico and we look at a company, not just the product, but the company as a whole, one of the things we do is to work with these vendors to fill out what we call a vendor security questionnaire. So we ask a series of questions about their information security programs to better understand how they protect data on their side. Because cybersecurity is an evolving field, and one of the big changes that has occurred in the last 2 to 3 years is this idea known as a shared responsibility matrix. So we have to absorb some risk and responsibility for how we use the platform, but we also have to assume that our vendor is accepting some shared responsibility for how they're protecting that data, how they are engineering their platform, and that they are continuing to evolve the platform to meet the increasing world of cyber threats that come along with this type of technology. So when you say the word AI, it makes people either really excited or really scared, or sometimes both at the same time. And so one of the components that we've been working with Cortico on is understanding how AI impacts their overall information security program. And so we have met with them and they have kindly submitted their questionnaire. I will also say, and I think Alex will agree, that Cortico, because it is a newer technology, is also a newer company in the space. And so we have been trying to help provide them with some guidance around information security that will help to, sorry, that's my phone, just ignore it. Yeah, it's not my work phone, we're good, okay. It's my work phone, I have to go answer it. But wanting to understand how we can help them improve their information security posture, because improving theirs helps to improve ours. So again, we want to make sure that as you all are choosing a platform to help to capture these stories and to work with that data, that we can help assure you that these are the risks we know, and these are how we can help mitigate those risks for the city and for the engagement board. And so that's what we do. And so we have found that for Cortico, we do have, a few concerns, but they have been a great vendor to work with as we've helped to evolve. And so we are happy to know that they have addressed some very specific concerns that we had raised as a part of our evaluation of the company. So again, our team's job is never to say no to any platform, unless you bring me a platform where we're putting clear text social security numbers on a website, and then it's an absolute no. Or, as we had recently, someone bringing me a request that use technology from what's known as an ITAR country, which is an information or international trafficking issue. So, we can't do business with North Korea. You can't do business with Cuba. You can't do business with Iran. You can't do that. So we do that. So we also look at regulatory standards. So the city, because it is such a large entity and it is a very complex entity when it comes to cybersecurity and compliance, we come under a lot of regulatory standards that people may not realize. So some of them are very obvious. The city takes payment cards for payments for like your water bill. So that puts you under what's known as payment card industry data security standards. But some people may not realize we are actually under the European Union's general data protection requirements because of our public safety department and the work that they do, as well as the fact that we have employees who may be residents of the EU, even though they're here in North Carolina now. So it's a very complex compliance piece as well. So what we're seeing is that Cortico is a new technology. There are a few risks, and we've provided that information to Nadia and her team. We don't see a reason not to move forward with Cortico, but with the knowledge that there are some things that we're going to continue to work with this vendor on a yearly basis to continue to review their information security policies and procedures to make sure that they are not just keeping it where it is currently, but also continuing to improve. So I'll turn it over to Alex to get her response to what I've just said.
That all sounds great. And we really, really appreciate just the diligence and thoughtfulness around how you all have worked with our team. And as a young team, it's also just been very instructive for us to identify the things that we can improve on. And it's been incredible insight as well, because, we worked with many different government agencies, but not a lot, to be honest. Durham, City of Cambridge, City of Chicago, New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, New York City Department of City Planning. So we have this experience, but we are definitely still learning. And so it's been very, very helpful. And we're excited to continue to learn and grow as we build our relationship together. And unfortunately, I do not have Akiva Leffert, who's our VP of Engineering, sitting next to me to give you a more technical response. That's really his role. But I'm just happy when we make our partners happy. And so that is my role at the organization.
Maureen, can I ask you, having assessed everything that Cortico does, the risk, having those addressed, where does that put us in the timeline of cementing that relationship to kind of hit the ground?
So the information security team is one gatekeeper. I hate that word gatekeeper. It's not really the right word, but kind of we're a threshold. And so we are approving that. So it goes into the next step. And I'm honestly not sure who that goes to next. I believe we are kind of one of the final semaphores that to make sure everything. Semaphore, there's a better word. We make sure we don't step into an oncoming train. But yeah, so I believe we're pretty close. Nadia, I don't know if someone here can speak to where it goes next, but our piece is complete.
Sure, I can chime in. Sorry I'm not there in person, guys. But hello, everyone. Just to kind of answer that question. So we have like a procurement checklist, and that was like the final thing on it. Everything else has been completed. And so pretty much just getting DocuSign, signatures and stuff like that routed, and then good to go. Hopefully. But also, don't hold me to it. It could be another 2 months. Who knows?
We are not in control of procurement, is what it comes down to.
Specific IT questions for you,
I guess mine was more of a legal question, but is there anything within the contract that limits liability for data breaches?
So that's one of the things that will come next. So as we get the contract, we will review that for very specific pieces of data security. And we do have, so we have this, so part of our vendor vulnerability program. First part is the questionnaire. We also have, and we've worked with the city attorney's office to create what's known as a vendor security addendum. So when we have a situation like this where we either have a very high risk vendor because of the data to which they have access, or if we have a younger company that may not have the most mature information security program, then we have a addendum that can go with the contract that specifically outlines the different aspects of an information security program that needs to be in place and needs to be maintained, whether that is security awareness training and phishing simulation for their employees, background checks for their employees, that they have some type of monitoring program for their vendors. So we're not the only ones doing this. This is actually a very fundamental piece of information security. So it is categorized and outlines very clearly the city's expectations for our vendors in relation to information security. But it is included as that shared responsibility. There are legal requirements around a data breach as well. So you all may know this already, but for example, if we were to have a ransomware and we got a request for payment for ransom, the state law does not allow us to even have that conversation. We do not pay ransoms for ransomware. And our vendors, depending again on the location of the vendor, because the United States does not have a single data or information security policy. It's state-based. And so unlike the EU that says you have 72 hours to report a breach, it's very highly dependent on the state and on the industry. So for example, if you're a publicly traded company, you do what's called a Sec 8 report that tells the federal government something's happened, but we don't come under that. We're not a for-profit company. So we request in our documentation and contracts that we request 48 hours. We're willing to negotiate to 72, but we would prefer 48 hours because as we've learned, as you all could probably guess, the city of Raleigh is constantly under attack. This is a daily thing for us. And so we have had some issues, and one of our neighboring cities got hit with a ransomware attack in the middle of last year, and they are still recovering from it. And so we don't want to go there. And so we try really hard to prevent these when we can. But we have had a couple of scares. And in those cases, we've been very lucky that the vendors have been very open and honest with us. So we work very hard to engage our vendors and to build really strong partnerships with them so that they will give us information in relation. And it's a two-way street. If we discover a breach, then we share what are known as indicators of compromise with our vendors because we can be a vector for a vendor to be attacked. They can be a vector. They can be what's known as a third party to us being attacked, but we can also be used in an attack. And people try to use the Raleigh brand all the time in things like phishing attacks, business email compromises, and those sorts of things. And so we ask for 48, we'll compromise to 72, but we will not go more than 72 hours notification for a breach.
The information that Court will be collecting, a lot of it will be identifying information, but they're not collecting any sensitive information like social security cards or bank account information?
They are not collecting any sensitive data, which we would consider what we call PII or personally identifying information. But they are in that nebulous space of identifying information because of the voice. And so one of the things we've talked about with Cortico is making sure that there is a secure way for those recordings to be moved, that they're not being permanently held anywhere. They're not being used to train models for other clients, and that there's secure storage of those, and that as they're being processed, that they are being secured as well. So we've had some very extensive discussions with Cortico about those. The voice one is where you get into things like GDPR, because it's biometric. It can help to identify you as an individual person. And so, yes, we do have that, but we don't have any what we would consider PII being captured.
I'm going off my own agenda, so if y'all have questions. Reroute at this point. I think that would be a great sort of transition into looking at the specific work that we're doing. So Alex, I know you said you have questions about our work plan, which we've all seen, we've talked about several times. So I'd love to sort of switch to that and then go into the last bit, any questions that we have and the toss it.
Great. That sounds good. Yeah, I took some notes on the slides that you sent, which are great. One of my favorite parts of my job is digging into the planning at the beginning, around a new project. So this is fun for me. And I noticed that you are planning to, one of your strategies for outreach is actually potentially partnering with organizations that you have relationships with. This is, I think, one of the strongest approaches that we've seen when we've worked with other partners, to really start in that space of trusted person in the community who's reaching out to people that they know to bring them into the conversations, but also you're kind of providing like a bit of a gift to the organizations that you work with, because you're setting them up to be able to use the data that they collect in some really interesting ways. One example I can share recently is, we worked with the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene on a project that engaged 15 different community partners around some of the most underserved neighborhoods around the city to get a pulse check on how people were thinking about COVID-19 resources in their community. And the partners that we worked with in that project built facilitation skills. They participated in the sense making. They were a part of developing the output. And then they use those stories in their own advocacy efforts within their neighborhood. So I just want to kind of like underline that. I know it's like one idea of many great ideas in your outreach plan, but working with partners has really, really been a proven and really wonderful strategy for many of our partners. And we also have experience on the Cortico team of bringing those partners into workshops and bringing them the skills to support the work if that's of interest to you all as well. So that was kind of one, less of a question, more of just like, oh, that's cool. I'm excited about that. Dale?
Can I ask a quick question in relation to that, please? Yeah. The partners, are they internal to the city of Raleigh or external or both?
They would likely be external. So that might be a nonprofit organization
Okay.
that helps promote the event. So it's not collecting data or stories with them, but it's somebody that helps promote that we are hosting these conversations so that they can be partners in recruiting or getting information people might be interested in.
Okay. Now, one thing I'll say here is that if you are going to be doing any type of partnerships where you're going to be recording sessions at a partner site, then you would need some type of memorandum of understanding, because we've agreed to have that done, but we can't make that agreement for other agencies. So just a heads up.
Yeah. That's not the plan.
Yeah.
We will also not make that the plan.
It does open up a bit of legal can of worms if you do it.
Good to know. That's really good to know. And I guess that this kind of connects to a question that I have. I saw that there are independent facilitators who will be leading the conversations. I'm just wondering who those independent facilitators are, how you're planning to recruit them. What does that look like?
So all of those are big question marks. The notion, the work plan is sort of our intention and our starting place to be able to inform city council of the work that we hope to do. And it was our best guess and best shot at how we would like things to look. I think we universally agreed that it was more appropriate to have an independent facilitator to host these conversations versus board members or the Department of Community Engagement staff. And so that's kind of our first step into just making that declaration that we don't want to be the ones that are creating different environment for conversations. The hope is to have one consistent one, so we wouldn't want several facilitators or multiple for each event. We did also agree that board members could be present and sort of guide whether it's, maybe the facilitator that we select goes off of onto a track or information that we did not agree on, or changes the scope or sort of comfort level in the room, just to be sort of guidance there. And then I think we also have the option or listed the option and interest in being trained in whatever workshop that Portico has on how to do that, even if we're not facilitating ourselves. So we don't have any of them concrete yet. We haven't started the search. I don't think exactly for who that might be, but it's just a hope to have someone else sort of lead those conversations for us.
Great, great. The piece around, you all participating in the workshop and thinking about ways to kind of open the door to that, I think is really important, because I know that this is going to be a more kind of limited in scope pilot, 6 conversations, which is great, by the way. I love that approach of starting simple and small and learning more about the potential for the work before you kind of start big, even if eventually you might be thinking bigger. But I think that there's, even in a pilot, you can still plan towards sustainability. And I always tell partners that our goal at Cortico is to eventually be able to like step back and you all carry the work forward. So I think it's great that you're already starting to plan for that and think about that in your involvement in the workshops. So that's wonderful. What does the participant application process look like? That was another question that I had.
Great question, Alex. We also haven't defined that really either. One really strong point, I think, in that process is that we do have 3 different subcommittees that work on this that work within this board. One of them is the equity subcommittee that is chaired by our vice chair for the actual community engagement board. And so I'll speak to just the general and I'll let Jeff give a little bit more insight to that, even though we haven't started that process specifically with this. But the hope is to, one, create something that is accessible to everyone. So we don't want to limit who has access to this information or who has access to applying successfully. And it really is not meant to be an application process, more of an invitation. So we'll ask questions to make sure that it's a valid, information and person coming into the conversation, but not something that's supposed to be strenuous. So making sure people can find it, they have access to it, everyone has as much opportunity as possible to submit their information, making sure the information is easily digestible and submitted, but also creating a more wide-ranging pool of participants. So we don't want to limit it to geography specifically. I mean, we'll work in all parts of the city, but we don't want to exclude any places geographically, socially, by any other standard. So Jeff is sort of our lead as the equity subcommittee chair on all things equity for the board in general, but also the processes that we put in place to make sure that the work that we do and invite other people into is equitable as well. So I'll let you, if you have specifics on what you want that application to look like, even if it's based off of like PPCSF.
Yes, the Department of Community Engagement has an application form or a way to capture data. So we anticipate that will be the primary funnel, and all of the partnerships and sort of work is driving to essentially establish as wide a pool as possible so that randomization can control for bias in various elements. To then sort of, I think we have one of the things that sort of is a question is we know we have 5 districts, so that's one approach of like, let's do 5 conversations that's district by district, and then perhaps just have a fully randomized sample on the 6th one or something like that. So that would be a piece of dynamic that we would be interested in hearing from Cortico in terms of how to ensure that we're receiving rich and thickened data.
Yeah, such a good question. It's interesting. I'm thinking about the city manager selection project that we worked on in the city of Cambridge, and I can even send you a list of kind of how they broke people up by group, but it was not with community partners. So, similarly, it was thinking about affinity groups. So people who were kind of in the housing advocacy space, people who were thinking about transportation, just kind of like different ways of breaking up people by interest and kind of area of advocacy. So that was the way that they did it. I think doing it by geography makes a lot of really, really good sense. We typically advise partners not to think about putting people in a conversation who, you probably have heard about the bridging divides kind of genre of community conversation. We do not do that. So it's not about like bringing people together with like distinct differences and putting them in a conversation. So I think starting out with that shared experience of geography is a great idea. And then for the randomized group, you could try something like, after you collect your conversations by geography, you could even play highlights from the conversations you've collected in that group, and have people respond and kind of like build on the conversations that have started. If you want to be more kind of systematic about it and ask the same questions, I think that would also totally work. But just thinking about the ability that you would have with the recorded conversations that you've already collected, if that's an approach that you'd want to take. So.
May I make a suggestion here as well? Is that I don't know if your current application has this, but it would be a really good opportunity to disclose to the applicants that they would be recorded and to allow them an opt-out because they do own their digital identity. We want to honor that digital identity. So giving them that option to say, I do not want to be recorded. And then you guys will need to have some type of protocol procedure for how you handle that within a meeting, or you may decide at that point you may want to say we can't honor that at this time. We do need people who are going to allow us to record because it is part of a very specific proof of concept. But it's always a really good idea to do that as early in the application process as possible because you don't want people to show up and then go, wait, you're recording me? No. And then you've got chaos at the meeting site.
Yeah, I think that is such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. And in fact, forefronting the recording, definitely a practice that we recommend you do in your outreach, as well as throughout the conversation guide, reminding people that they're being recorded. You'll see that language built in, but also in that, making it very clear why you're recording them, because I think that people are just not used to the idea of a recorded community conversation, especially at the city level. It's like, well, like, why? Like, we go to town halls and these other things, and sometimes they're recorded, but the recording piece isn't as like, upfront. And so making it very clear what you're using this data for is really, really important. And I know that you're all planning to do that, but just wanted to say it loud here as well.
Marina, do you have that? One of the things that jumped out as Alex was talking is the idea of sort of like playing previous samples, or are there information security concerns around identifiable voice in that context? I mean, is that even an issue?
Oh, you're getting into some cloudy space here. Technically, from a privacy perspective, we would prefer that we had permission to use a person's voice in that setting in public. So one of the things you might also want to do as part of that application process is to get that agreement as part of this as well, to say, may we use recordings of your voice in other, and again, be very specific about where you might use it. For previously recorded voices, do you guys have a way of identifying who it is?
Is that to Alex?
To y'all? Because I'm assuming they're not coming in through Cortico. This is a different recording.
Oh, no, I think
through
it was in describing, like we have
Oh.
conversation number 1, but by conversation 4, we're
Okay,
playing.
got it, yeah. So yeah, if it's all coming through Cortico, I thought we were saying that y'all had recorded before now. I'm like,
No, we're not off the reservation.
Okay, good. Yeah, so yeah, as long as it's through Cortico, you have it, an agreement from that individual that you can use their recording in other spaces, and again, very specifically these spaces, and that you agree not to go beyond those spaces, then and part of that also too, I would encourage you all to include as a statement in that as well around the idea that these are secured. You want to let people know up front that the city takes that very seriously, that information is protected. It's used in very limited ways, only by people who should have access to it. Because again, it is,
you get into the GDPR area, we are getting a little bit gray area here. So, but yeah, as long as you have that agreement by the participant that you can use it and you're being very specific as to how you're using it and you stay within your lane, you're fine.
Yeah. And, you know, oh, go for it.
2 follow-up questions for him. Do you have a process checklist reference for partners as we go into this process for us to make sure that we're doing so, like sample or working with us to workshop what our agreement waiver is and something that we can go through to make sure that we are compliant security wise? And then if we need to also share with Marina to make sure we've got our bases covered, is that something you provide or is that something we need to sort of build ourselves and then?
We, you know, our prime artifact for agreement and consent is the conversation guide. So this is where we focus. We have a verbal agreement process. So I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on that. We have worked with partners. We can share examples of agreements that have been sent out in writing beforehand. But we always will introduce the consent language within the conversation guide. We do have a planning process that includes a project guide that acts as a checklist. So some of these things are also incorporated throughout. So those of you who are going to be closest to planning and implementing the project will work closely with on that. But the language in the guide is really the most important resource for most of our partners when it comes to sharing all of the upfront information about where the data is going to go and inviting them to give their verbal consent.
I will also say this, from the lens of equity and inclusion, everybody has a right to withdraw their consent at any time. So you'll want to have a protocol if someone changes their mind so that that information is no longer used or held. The deletion of that holding can take place, 30 to 60 days out, but you immediately need to stop using it if someone does remove their consent. So you do want to make sure, again, we want to honor people's digital identities and privacy. So if someone comes to a meeting and then realizes, oh, I don't want that used, they do have a right to say, please do not use that.
And is that in some, like they sit through a 1-hour session and then they say, I don't want this used, or is that by statement? So like I say one thing, I talk for 5 minutes, I'm like, I don't want that.
Usually consent is holistic.
Yeah.
We don't want to get into I don't want you to use this sentence. It would be a holistic withdrawal consent. I'm pretty sure Corco doesn't have that level of technology yet.
Well, we actually, we do offer redaction. I will say, yeah, this is something, this is common practice for us that at the end of every conversation guide, we share the Cortico email. And we can always, this language can be specific to you all as well, but we typically share the Cortico help desk email, and any participant who wants to redact any part of what they shared, they can write to us and redact it. I will say in my 5 years of working at Cortico, even though this language is in every single conversation guide we've ever drafted, we've maybe received one request. So it does not typically happen, but it is an option that we include, and people do appreciate it.
It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
So I have a question.
Yes.
What Stacy said, is there a time frame they can remove it, or is any time, like 6 months later?
They should be able to remove it at any time.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's very important that you're for each of your sessions that you are tracking the attendees. And what I would also recommend is that that you all, if it's possible to work with Cortico, if they do receive that request, that you all are also notified of that as well, because you may want to do some follow-up just to assure that person that this has been done to continue to build relationship.
Will we be expected to manage the deletion and the compliance on that side? Like, we don't have nothing.
That's I believe that would be Cortico.
Okay. Yeah.
As long as you all, again, you all do need to be aware of it though, because you are So not to get too technical, but we talk about this idea of a data owner and a data processor. So the city of Raleigh in its contractual agreement is the data owner. Cortico is the data processor. And so you all are ultimately responsible for the security and privacy of that data, or the city of Raleigh is. And so that's why, we want to make sure that if that does occur, that you all are aware of it, again, to follow up to assure that that has been completed.
Yes. Yeah. And we can develop a process around that where we keep you in the loop and we don't redact anything until we make sure that you know about it.
I have a question about, you were talking about outputs at one time, and you have I think you called it like a video reel or something like that output, like after you do the sense making portion. Can you talk about like the other outputs? What else might the output look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we can actually share examples of different outputs beyond the Durham. I know you're all familiar with Durham, but we can share examples of beyond Durham, what we've created with partners. For the city manager search process, the output was the job description for the city manager. So highlights from conversations were throughout the job description. And I think that the highlight as a unit in and of itself is something that all of our partners use, sharing on social media in some cases, including in more just kind of, voice heavy reports outside of the portal, including in, we work with a lot of journalists, so they include highlights in their reporting, obviously. So there are many different ways you can use a highlight, and we can share some examples that partners have put together on their own. As an organization, we support partners in creating voice medleys. So there's no video, it's just voice, but we do actually have ideas on how you can make it more visual. So that's something that we can support with. And then portals. And, we work actually here where I am today at MIT Media Lab. There are incredible visualizations that are being created here that we hope to offer to partners at some point. So as we continue to build our relationship, one of the most exciting things about working with us is we're always introducing new things that come from MIT to Cortico. So there are just many different ways of visualizing voice data that we're seeing, which, are just, they're beautiful, even if they don't have immediate utility, but they also have utility if you want to see connections between voices and kind of use them in different ways in your work. But we can share a long list of examples for you all to look through if that is interesting and helpful as you think about what you want to create.
Okay.
This is really in the weeds, and it has to do with withdrawal of consent related to the associative nature of the sense making. Does it feel like, in terms of withdrawal of consent, is it simply technical in relationship to, like, how do we kill the associations that come off of somebody's withdrawn consent?
That's a good question.
And I say that because I'm literally in my dissertation and working through data analysis, and that's why I'm.
So interesting. So can you help me understand the question a little bit more? So yeah, I would love to.
If we're working iteratively, right? So if we start with conversation one and we start, let's say we're going to take some of those the audio medleys into, conversation 2, 3, 4, but somebody from conversation one, after we've done processing, says no. The reality is that the knowledge and part of the sense is built upon that association. And so in technicality, the knowledge is still used. Like, that's why it's so in the weeds, because you're obviously, you can pull the words and not have the highlight, but then you're still going to have the associative artifacts, that it'll just be a gap when you get back to it.
Totally. I think that this is something that you should put in the consent language. And we've done this with some partners where we actually are doing a project here at MIT with students, and there's a list of very specific outputs that their voices will be a part of, and then at the end, there's the potential for their voice to be public, and so there's always that potential, and especially once you start sharing audio out there in the world, you could even imagine a situation. It won't happen, but you can imagine a situation in which I'm like in a room and I'm like here with my phone recording, voices that are like played here in the physical space. And then I take that recording and I share it elsewhere. And then someone says, no, I don't want to be a part. I don't want my voice to be a part of this project anymore. But I have their voice on my phone now because I recorded it in a room. So there are like always things like that are possible. And I think the most important thing is making sure that participants know the potential reality of that sharing. And if they really want to redact something, you'd also think about how the language at the end could support like making sure they make that decision soon. Another thing that we've seen partners do is if you plan to have this well-crafted medley that you share within another conversation to get reaction and response, you could just share that medley with the participants whose voices are a part of it before it's shared as a courtesy, as like a sign of respect. Like, we just want to keep you in the loop. We created this using your voice, and we're going to be playing it in more conversations here in Raleigh. So that's another thing we could do.
I will also say that as part of redaction, please know that if there are certain types of statements made in a public place that are recorded that have legal impact, they cannot be redacted. So if someone comes into a space and threatens to kill somebody, we cannot redact that. That is a legal issue. That is evidence. And so want to be really clear that in those cases, that's why it's really important for you all to know, your facilitator know what's happening in those spaces and flag that for you in case there is anything that might have a legal bend to it. But you can also include that in the language of that as well, that if it's anything legal, because one of the gray areas we have here is right now, law enforcement could come in with a warrant and get all these recordings. There's nothing we can do to stop them because we don't have a holistic data privacy, data security in the United States. And so there's also some spaces where they can actually take it without a warrant. So we just want to be really clear with your participants that, I don't want to close down conversations and stories, but just know that if someone makes a threatening statement, for example, that cannot be redacted.
Go ahead.
I just want to offer to the board that you can be totally straightforward and upfront with people, and they're aware.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed a lot of activists that have done off-book activity, and they just don't talk about it. So empowering people to make the decisions to share the parts of the story that matter to them with these understandings of the potential implications and consequences is something that people do still, go forward with.
So I was just going to ask, is the ultimate value to us as the board the playing of the audio recording or the outcomes from the conversations? Because I feel like in some ways, we're getting into a digital legal quagmire of trying to say, let's replay this, let's get it out there. And what I'm really interested in is what the outcome of what those voices say really is, and how we can put that forward as policy recommendations. And that would that help us kind of get around some of the, oh, I don't like the way I sound, I want to be redacted. If it's just, there's an anonymous sense to these were people in the room, and this was the recommendations and the things that they came up with and the things that they said in a very broad and general sense versus this is this person talking. If maybe that may not be what has the value for us versus, I liked the Durham recordings. I thought they were super cool, but for what we want to do, I feel like maybe the tool can lend itself to something else that kind of puts us in a space where we're like, yeah, we're good. So for the experts.
Alex, do you have any customers?
Sorry, Alex had to jump off. She has a
sorry.
flight to catch, so
So one of the things I could say is this.
Thank you.
thank you. Alex.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was great. And I'm available if anyone wants to have additional conversation as well beyond this. Thank you.
If you have additional questions about the work plan, do you mind shooting those to Dale or Nadia so that we can review them as board?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll send those along. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
What I would recommend is if you're doing just a simple first proof of concept, is possibly take those pieces, to your point, off the table and just focus on the outcomes piece. Make sure that this is working and this is getting what you need, and then phase in at a later date to do any types of reels or releases. And that way you kind of just step people through and get people more comfortable with the technology. Again, this is new, cutting edge
It's still
issues.
such a narrow profile of anyone that's going to go to the city website or anywhere else and go, let me listen to, people chatter versus.
And I just want to situate where I was specifically was in the world of constructing knowledge and sense. And so like the reality of minutes would be a great example of what the concept being illustrated, right? Like the world of we go and we get 6 months worth of minutes and bring it in here and we look at this highlight, that highlight. It's that I'm talking about, less about public displays. And that also is really just about sort of like information gathering for further development.
Yeah, and I love the idea of taking, using the AI to pull together some recommendations and define some things, but having to, the idea of replaying it and have folks, because I can easily imagine somebody hearing themselves and going, oh my gosh, I sound terrible. I want the whole thing redacted if they know they can do it. And I don't know that benefits us. And that gets us into, edit, or just kind of going, oh, maybe we set our sights on getting that body of work that, kind of creates the recommendations that isn't tied to any name, any voice, and then push it out.
But I think it's important to recognize that consent can be withdrawn regardless of what we do for output. So considering somebody saying no, we have to do it.
No. 100%. But I'm saying you're less likely I think if you hear or see yourself, there's one space. If you have a sheet of recommendations, you go, I was a part of that. It's a lot harder to go, I don't want to read that. I don't even know what I said.
Why would they be receiving a copy of what they said?
Well, if we're gonna put like an audio recording out or anything else, that would happen, so.
So I'll scale it back just a little bit in terms of the actual process. It's called a member check in official qualitative research language. It's the ability to say that I'm being represented the way that I thought I was when I talk to you. So that it's just a way to increase accountability between the researcher and the participant. More than anything, it doesn't have to be a fixed process in there. It's just a way that you can empower, you can affirm people and let them have the decision making around what happens. Because, here's what I would say. What I love about Cortico is that it's an opportunity for people to share their lived experience, and it gives people empowerment to move how they want to. And one of the challenges in that world is that lived experiences come with trauma. Right? They come with things that are not always exactly where we want to be and how we want to move, and perhaps don't want for it to be entered into essentially public record. And so that's part of, at least specifically, my concern, in the sense of we just want to make sure that this is as consistent and transparent a process as possible. So like when we talk about if they know about it, there cannot be ifs. They have to know about it. That's the point. It's to give them the power to say, no, my knowledge is what I own, and I don't want for it to be there.
I'm gonna stop us right there. We've gone much further into, I think, process and potential than maybe we should have, or was constructive use of having Alex here, because I really wanted everybody to be able to talk about what our specific process is going to be and have her evaluate that so that we can move forward. I think it's all valuable. I think it's 10 steps further down the line than we are right now, because we don't even have a process, because we haven't gotten our initial walk with Cortico. So I'm just gonna stop it right there. I do think, again, I'm glad this is recorded, because I'm not gonna remember what y'all said and everything that we know we need to have. But I do think it's one, good to have an open line of communication so that we have a direct person. Even if we do, I hate feeling like we have to channel through Nadia because that's one other thing that we have to ask her to do. So if we at least have a reference point with Alex as we start moving through this process with Corey, I think that's great. Two, I think it's really great that she had questions about what we're doing. Because we are creating something that we think would work, they know what's going to work. So having them evaluate, what we and set our intention is very important. And then knowing that there's open line of communication so that when we do come to things like consent, security, back end, front end, beginning of process, after process, I can look you in the eye and say, I can come to your office and find you. But I think moving forward, once we get everything solidified, everything signed off on, it's clear that we have a lot of information that we don't know about what needs to make this process successful, but also safe for everybody involved. So hopefully that can be the second conversation as we move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. And we can think in our respective, especially committees, and what we are responsible for bringing to the table for community conversations or whatever we call them. Making sure that we've got questions that we can ask IT specifically, that we can ask Alex specifically, so that we're following the proper process, again, for our information, but for the people that are participating. Because what we don't want to do is ask people to come into the space, share information, and then they'll feel betrayed, misrepresented, misled, not taken care of, and we be responsible for that as well. That was a lot. We've done a lot of talking. Any questions for Marina before we move forward out of Portico into other old business? Thank you for being here.
Of course.
Making information digestible.
That's our job. That's our job. Happy at any point as you guys are going through this or any other types of software that you may be wanting to acquire. We're happy to partner with you all to help you with the risk management and the security issues and the compliance and privacy issues that come with them. If you guys have at any point in your Cortico journey, if you want me to come back in and help review anything or point you at anything, I know that one of the things we hit was, well, Durham didn't ask for any of this and New York City didn't ask for any of this. And I said, can't tell you about their information security and privacy policy or programs, but we do. We take it very seriously here at the city. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate this partnership. Let me know what else I can do to help and support you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move into old business and hopefully go through a little bit faster than it's listed. First thing is our meeting locations. We've already gotten the updates and flipped, Bill's staff report. So we know that we can't meet in council chambers. We have meeting spaces designated through next month. So I think February was the last month that we had preset. Was it this month? I'm all right.
So it was, I missed it, I'm sorry. So it was, we cannot meet at a specific time or period?
That's a good question. I think it was at council chambers at all, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll read exactly what the email said.
He's like, no, and then that means
Yeah, this is from Melissa Johnson. She is executive management coordinator. She spoke with Michelle Millette. If you don't know who she is, she's very high ranking in the city manager's office. Stated that RTN will not be able to support the community engagement board meeting. Therefore, staff is looking for additional options for you to present back to the board. Let me know if you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. So they're gonna come back with some options. Like I said, I'll be looking for options as well, so. Yeah.
So it sounds like plan pathways. I mean, the only question that I have about pathways as like a temporary space holder, and this might be me proposing it too, I don't know, is that I thought initially one of the reasons why we went over that OEP was because there wasn't a space that we thought would be able to hold all 16 of us plus.
Maybe at the time.
Okay.
But there is a space, the room upstairs can hold up to 25 people, so. should be no problem. It is cold, but yeah.
It's so weird.
Lord,
Turn the heat up.
So maybe Dale and I will workshop what might be available, because I know, like you said, you may not have space now that the building is full. Our last resorts, no offense, are pathways and OP.
Yeah.
So
I think,
unless.
I can't promise anything, but I think Pathways is available on Wednesday nights.
Or if we, I mean, if there's another,
There's a conference room that's there in the, in City Hall. That's upstairs. I mean, it's,
Oh, the room 305, I think it
Yes.
is.
yes, thank you.
I'll check.
Yeah, because that has the cameras and,
Yeah.
The main idea being in a central location and a consistent location. So hopefully at some point we can get some folks from the public to actually see the meeting and participate, at least in public. So
I'll check and see if that's available.
folks seem to be able to find City Hall.
That's what I was about to ask you, because you had mentioned where they take, because they have a large amount of people.
Yeah.
okay. We have copies of this collateral piece that we've had in the process for a few months. This is not what its final form would look like. These are just enlarged versions. It will be a trifold. No, don't worry, that we're gonna hang it up. It would be. You want to?
No, it's a Bible.
A Bible, yeah, not Bible. This is all the information that we initially presented what we wanted. Katie from Communications came back and said, we need to make this on a appropriate readable scale, accessible readable scale, revise the information. We did vote on this in December. So it should be the same information. She just put it into this template for us, added some of the stock photos, and then added things like our QR code.
I think this looks great. This is exactly what we talked about, but being a little bit picky, going from this really crisp looking stock art to this odd picture in the bottom right.
It's a street festival.
Oh, okay. This is a.
Well, I mean, I agree. I just don't like flipping back and forth. I mean, I'm not.
Whose orange are these? Whose hands? These isn't sock. This isn't any, no, I know, but it's
There's-
not right. It's supposed to be.
Yeah. No. There's somebody that looks like they have 6 fingers.
Yeah, no, and these hands aren't, this is AI. These hands aren't coming from a person.
So what I'm hearing is that we'd like different photos.
I'm writing that down.
And more photo consistency. I mean, if we're gonna go with the AI generated, I mean, I don't love it. I'm in your camp on that. But it's very harsh to have these stuff down the bottom corner, regardless of what it is after seeing the other.
It looks like a real photo versus all of the AI.
Right.
Yes.
Right, so
All the photos would be great.
I have a question. Is this gonna be the format in which we hand this out to people, or is this only for?
Sorry, you missed that. Oh, the actual
It's a
information.
print piece.
I don't know if we'll have it digitally. I guess, could we
I
have?
know it's a bifold. He said it
He's
was.
looking at it visually.
yeah, I mean, it was sent as a PDF and that's how I was looking at it. So.
So like,
PDF
is this
proof.
gonna also be on the CG
Can't be.
website?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is gonna be a bifold?
Yes,
Smaller.
Smaller.
Unlike that.
yes, that was the
I think
initial.
it'll be I think it's a good
Yeah,
single feet of
Yeah, it's gonna look like that. This is just an example for everybody to look at.
So it's totally visually
So
accessible.
this is big, but we want it to be like,
I mean, I like how they treated the fold. I mean, I don't love the image, but how they treated the fold here, I think is really.
Yeah.
yeah, cause
Yeah,
that
it looks better on there.
doesn't read
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, let's go. I mean, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
But maybe once we have a permanent meeting location, like, we could have a picture of whatever that is. Not of us meeting, but like, if there's a building or something.
We won't have a permanent meeting location.
No,
No,
I'm literally.
unless there's something I wasn't there to discuss.
We talked about that in December so this will be our last month that's planned in a rotation of places, but we had a motion on the past to have a consistent meeting space. Yes, and so that was initially supposed to be council chambers, but we just feel that we can't do that, maybe another place in city.
City Hall.
City Hall.
Yeah.
By City Council. But the vote was happening more consistently instead of rotating.
Well, then, not.
We don't know where.
No, that was only one question, but I won't open it. We'll talk about it. Yeah.
Possibly, yes. I think the only thing, the same reason that we didn't add like meeting dates was in case some of that changes, so we could all be off this board maybe a year and the new board wants to meet somewhere else and then we use, not waste it, but we use printed material that doesn't reflect the same information anymore.
I've got two kind of comments and it kind of goes to what you had just spoken with me, is the need even for pictures. Where my mind goes is if this is cut in half, what size font is it going to print as? And is it ADA compliant for people with vision challenges? That's something to consider, because if you're cutting it all in half, then the space of it matters and because it'll squish the font. But I think also too, is at least in the top picture, I can't see people's faces, I'm making just assumptions, but I see a lot of people.
There's a lot of work.
You know, and I just think, you know, maybe the Department of Equity and Inclusion can do a review of it, because they deal with ADA, and they also would see it through that lens and just be attuned to it. It's not like our board. Those are just, I'm thinking font size, because
Just for reference, these are what are out front, and it is one, I like the idea of one photo somewhere.
Yeah.
But there's no other.
in the back, like the shapes are.
No, but like, I think they'll be similar to the side.
City wrong.
That's fine for like, I have 511.
Y'all saw me trying to work it out. Something, yeah,
Those are wrap cards.
yeah,
Mm,
but like,
They're
just looking at,
smaller.
if they
Yeah,
have
these are small.
photos, just as a visual of something that doesn't have photos on. Yeah, all the surface media, so, yeah.
I'm not opposed to any visual whatsoever,
Yeah.
you know, I think since it is a bifold, maybe the cover of it has a photo that whatever this top part looks like. But I think just being mindful that when you do open it, what size font, because I think this size font is okay, but when we start getting into smaller, it becomes challenging for people to access. And you'd stepped away, Stacy, but I was recommending that before printing and spending resources, to have the Department of Equity and Inclusion just do a review of it so that they can look through an ADA lens to make sure that it's compliant with best practices, and also to make sure that we've got, if we use people, that it's reflective of, you know, our city and our, the people that we represent.
Is that a check that Katie has to go through with communication,
As far as ADA compliance.
ADA and with equity? I mean, I'm just asking if it's like protocol for her, if that's an extra after.
Not really.
Well, if it's equitable.
Huh?
Are we also getting copies in Spanish?
I think we asked about that.
Yeah, I think we are getting copies in Spanish.
Okay.
But it is not a protocol for Katie, but, and, I mean, this is why I'm sharing this with y'all. This is just for you all to review. So whatever you all think that needs to be changed, please let me know. As far as having DEI check, that I can just go upstairs and ask DEI to check it for me. Yeah.
And then also if there aren't, you know, if there's not a brand guide that's been moved through that process, maybe that's something that to shorten, you know, because I would generally make the assumption that somebody would be doing that work in terms of the design as part of the process.
Maybe that'll be part of our policy recommendations for the city.
If they don't have one specifically, but they may within their own office have a brand guide that says X, Y, and Z, and it might already be baked into that.
Yeah, I know there are brand guides. I'm just not sure if running something through DEI is a part of it. But that's something I can check.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like the brand guide may have already gone through it. So if the guidelines are being followed, then technically.
It's a double.
Yeah.
I can say that from presentations that I've seen from staff is that it's not consistent. They don't use the colors according to, and the contrast of colors is in alignment with ADA. So if something is, then there's definitely a miss, because I've seen it in more than a handful of presentations, and that just includes, glaring in my opinion, but, I agree that a policy recommendation would be great so that, you know.
So I hear different photos. I personally, I think you can mix that bottom one altogether. I'm just saying.
And just use the.
Yeah, so just a different cover photo and maybe mix the inside one, bottom.
Yeah, and I put some black people in
Or maybe just the city, something that represents the city, like the city skyline or something that means.
it.
Yeah. Back picture.
Or something that is.
Yeah, the back was nice. Yeah, the back too.
It's a little bit more fun.
Okay,
But it's weird.
any other
Press
edits that we're gonna
conference.
request before we start? Okay.
Before we get into the city, and you can see.
Okay, so we're just asking for different photos, specifically the first photo, mixing the bottom third page photo.
Yes, a couple photos. Take this one out.
Yep,
Okay.
and then,
And then the hands. Yes. And then these photos as well.
we'll just ask her for some options.
Okay.
If she can.
I was for some options.
And then we can have it, I'm gonna call it quality control, but equity control check for ADA and DI standard.
Got it.
The way of doing the cover thing, right? The hands are not okay.
Yeah, he got it.
Okay, yeah, great. They're not.
I just, cover it up, the more I look at it, the more relative.
I can't, so you can't even tell like forever in the black and white, but in the color.
No, I can't.
We don't.
I can't always.
Well, thank Katie for her efforts.
Yeah.
Also, they like the they like the literature, the photos.
We gotta sandwich it.
Yeah.
Good, bad, good.
Third thing on this old business, I adore this work. I love to be in these meetings. I love to help record and do any of the pre and after work. I cannot serve as secretary, even with assistance. So I can't do it myself. I'm not committing myself to continuing to do this. I can't pay attention and feel like I'm doing a good job, running the meeting. We do not have a secretary officially. Veronica has been very gracious in, assisting unofficially, so not actually taking the role, but also still keeping minutes for us and helping fill in gaps. And Jeff, I'm not going to ask you to do it now, but I will let you know, and I will remind you via email. By the next meeting, we need to elect a secretary. And whatever that process is, if you're willing, let's talk about it, but it cannot be me.
I'm not at the next meeting, so obviously I'm out.
I'm gonna send you an email. I just want to put that on the radar. That is, one, very important for record keeping in general for us. I can't say that I'm the best record keeper because I do miss things as we're talking and moving through the meeting. So my minutes are what, as much as I can kind of catch. Two, I don't like the feeling of not having officer positions filled because we created this board of these positions, so we commit to filling them. Three, that leads into the fourth piece of business that we had to talk about. So the December meeting, Councilmember Jones brought up a couple of different topics. And at the end of the discussion, we talked about how we can be more communicative, with council on a regular basis. And one of the recommendations was to have sort of a summary, or I think Anthony put it like top 3 things we want the world to know from the meetings that we have. I think that's a great idea, so that as our liaison, she can show proof of what we're doing, but also just, put out information about what's going on, things that are important that the board is doing, or just be in regular communication as a responsible board with council. And we all agreed that that was a cool thing to do. I think we started a dialogue with her, not chief of staff, what do you call Dale?
Her community relations analyst,
Her analyst.
Jonathan, yeah.
About whether or not that would be helpful. It seemed like that conversation was positive and that
Yeah.
she would appreciate having something like that to relay. I still think it's a great idea. We didn't vote on it formally. I didn't want to bring it for a vote until we have a secretary.
Yeah.
Because somebody's gonna have to do that. And again, it can be brief. We could use Cortico to analyze our conversation. I don't know, but it's a summary. it could be the top two things, we can discuss what the format is, if it's top three things, if it's most important, if it's new business, if it's both, whatever that is. But to have discussion about, what that looks like after we have a secretary. So I think the sooner we decide on filling that office or that position, the sooner we can get those sort of reports going and get information out about what we're doing as a board. Does that make sense? This is all food for thought. I'm not saying we have to vote on it, but I do want to bring it up so that we get to a vote sooner than later. The public comment video, speaking of communication, so last meeting, Dale shared that Evan Raleigh requested that we redo a portion or all of the public comment video with, I don't know if it was specifically about edits to text, but with different personnel in the videos.
Right.
Being delicate. So, one, I think that would be great because it would be reflective of people that are currently on the board, because we did have board representation in the video, and I think that's a good thing. And two, just to be able to refresh it, if it's a new council and mayor, perhaps we have more luck, cooperation, partnership in getting that put out to the public and emphasizing the importance of that. Do you have any update, Dale, on how, when we can do that? Because that was a joint project led by the Office of Communication and conjunction with outreach.
Let me get with Katie on that.
Okay.
And see when we can like carve out some time. Cause yeah, that was a big, cause she pulled a lot of people in to kind of fill that space in the council chamber, so it could make it seem like it was a full chamber. Or if you want to even go that route again, I know one of the options was just maybe pulling old council videos, but then just doing both voiceover work to create the video. But I mean, that's up to you all if y'all want to.
Is there a way that we can maybe do animated?
Possibly, I can.
Yeah, you know, and because doing a voiceover and something that's, you know, light animated. I mean, not. I don't even Pixar, but light animation. I think could simplify things and make it something that, should we need to make a change in the future, it's, you know, because I hate to get so many people involved and do all the investment and the cameras and everything else. If we can, you know, get the point across these.
I think it's a great idea to make it more evergreen. Yeah, so I'll ask. I know we've done some animation videos with the BRT, with some other projects.
I've seen a couple that were nice, and it's just that simple, you know, stick figure animation.
Exactly.
But you know,
I'll ask about that.
And then if there are any other edits, updates, I'm gonna ask Outreach to take that as well, so that's where the board from. If there's anything in the script or that needs to be updated or changed, or just be better said, I'm gonna ask that Outreach get that on their agenda to review, just so when they're ready, we're ready. We're going to work. We don't think we know. Last thing that we had from that carried over from December was Councilmember Jones also mentioned that there were some changes to a conversation starting again about the noise ordinance. And while there wasn't a specific tangible ask from us, aside from talk about it during our meetings, so people know that it's coming up for discussion again, I did want to touch on one, if there's any specific action we do want to do. I don't know what that would be, whether it's something that we post online, like, I don't know what the ask was, but also how, like, when those issues come up, when she comes to us and says, there's this thing that we're talking about that affects the public and we want public feedback. I don't know if that falls under our rapid response portion of our work plan, but I feel like we either need to have a guideline or standard of what we will do or can do. And that can be, we'll, you know, put it on our social media, or we'll make it a special something that we say we're addressing during meetings, but some way that we acknowledge that that's something that's been brought to us. And then what that process looks like. So it's a very loosey-goosey question, but I think she'll continue to bring things to us that she thinks is relevant that we should have some say in. And I don't want to keep not.
No, I mean, this isn't the first time, I mean, the other one was about the school function, yeah.
Correct, which we did follow that down,
Yeah,
but it was
that-
more behind the scenes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think maybe getting the policy committee to create sort of a, you know, what is the criteria for response or pushing things out or because I think we could be chasing a lot of things and that may take away from our ability to be effective in the things that we have planned. So, and then it seems like something the policy committee could write a short algorithm of if this, then that, and go from there.
So what did they, I know the policy, when I first joined, they created like some letters or some responses. Is that similar?
I guess those are templates to public comments that help us route people to different parts of the city to get answers to their issue, which is
Okay, so this is just coming from a different source, but will we do the same thing?
maybe.
Okay.
So that's kind of the question, like, how do we, if she says this is the issue, one, and then two, can you help us alert the public to this issue that's being discussed? What do we do with that?
Okay. So kind of pushing out in different direction. Okay.
Yeah, what we feel is appropriate.
And in some ways, it feels like whatever we do, part of it, we want to drive back to that process tracker or like
Okay.
link to the tool itself. I think in this specific situation, because it's like, it feels like it would sort of make sense because it is about solution seeking in that way. I also feel like there's an opportunity in social media to like, what if we pose the question and people can come for public comment to answer that question, kind of a thing. Like that may be a way to at least get the ball rolling on finding some of the pipelines of information that we need to get a hold of, you know, to kind of get some leads in that way, might be effective.
So if it's like a post that says city Raleigh noise ordinance, and then it just, even in the caption says that it's one of the topics that may affect you, we're open for public comment, this is the next meeting, or is it more of a diverting to, here's your city council person, please be alert that this is happening in the next meeting, like, where do we
I think
want
it's
that to
both.
go? Okay,
Yeah, and kind of more the first, and then in the infographic, I guess make it an infographic, like, Lord's order, and then like a little, what is that?
so more
Yeah, I mean,
informational than it is
yeah.
like,
I think more
Action.
informational, and well, I mean, the caption can also have the action. But in the graphic, instead of just a picture with the words, like put as much information. I'm thinking, much information as possible without being crowded, right? So they can understand in that picture, just in case somebody shared that picture. We love people to read captions, but they don't, right?
I'm
Really,
not, I'm not.
they don't, they look at the picture, so as much information as possible in the graphic. And then for those of us who do read the caption, additional information. Because people look at the graphic and they start commenting, and it's almost like, did you read the caption? But I go to the comments.
and in that caption, are we asking them to do something specifically? Are we asking them to come share their public comment with us? Are we asking them to look into the issue? Like, because I don't, it depends on how.
Come here.
Well,
come
maybe-
love Some an action.
Come to public comment.
Well, there are, what are they?
This seems like the kind of thing that maybe it's just conversation starters.
Right, yeah, right.
And, you know, should Raleigh change the noise ordinance policy?
Yeah.
And let folks comment and then, you know, have, you know, if you'd like to, you know, express your comments to the council, here's your next opportunity to sign up to, you know, speak. I mean, not something, I wouldn't want to make it overly complex and I also wouldn't want to make it something that we had to overly monitor. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of these conversation starts may be good for our social media, assuming social media exists in 2 months.
Because the more people that respond, the more it's gonna show up in other feed. So you do
Yeah.
want some comments.
I have a question. Does the city of Raleigh like have, there are tools out there that, like cities, counties, whoever, they can sort of monitor what's going on in social media, just even beyond their like city of Raleigh specific social media, but like conversations that come up about City of Raleigh issues, like noise ordinance, like whatever we might put out. Does City of Raleigh have something like that so that they're kind of filtering through to say like, these are comments that are coming up about a particular issue through whatever social media option there is out there from this board or whatever other board? Because I would be concerned if like, we have this stuff out, or any board has this stuff out, it's not an official City of Raleigh monitored, like, social media, and then we have to do something with it. As opposed to there's already a tool that can kind of go scrub and just have that information for whomever is tasked with looking at it.
Yes. That's a question I will ask Brett. His name is Brett Compton. He's our social media. He runs all the social media for the City of Raleigh. So I don't know if we have that tool. I will definitely make a note to ask him about that.
I think Karen Ray would be another person that might monitor, it's not social media, but things that come up that are consistent.
Yeah, for sure, Karen.
Issues with the city, to the customer service. Experience for the city. I think that's her role. But I probably did. But that's the whole point. What they do is like, here are issues that people report to them, may not be social media, but they make the effort to go to someone to say these are issues and what those improvements may be. So maybe they have a lead on it. I don't know.
We can tag teams and do all the things that one does on social media, but I just don't, I mean, maybe it is our responsibility, but I don't know that it needs to be our responsibility among our other responsibilities to then somehow collect all these communities, like all these discussions through whatever, like moving forward through however many topics we put out there to then do something and give to somebody and follow through. Like if it, and maybe I'm missing it, maybe that's our responsibility. But if our responsibility is just kind of put it out there with the idea that there is going to be some body monitoring the larger conversations that are going on to do something with, like that's the tool that exists.
I feel like by work plan, we have implicated ourselves in that. In terms of the rapid response, like, yeah, the idea of, sort of hearing those, I think it's number 2, make sure the voices and needs of communities that have been ignored in the past are heard and government decisions. So that's like a part of the strategy, but I don't know that it necessarily needs to come specifically with, here's the answer and the solution, because we had all of these things. I think it's more around the fact that here are the things that we're hearing to enter into a larger conversation, because we're not, as we've discovered, we're not the decision makers, right? So like there is a point where sort of our responsibility ends, but it does, at least to me, feel that we are accountable on some level in that conversation to at least work with that information.
And that can be part of, if we do that summary, month to month on what we hear, we put that out after, this meeting. People respond to whatever they feel like they want to respond to about noise ordinance before our next meeting. We can share what some of the most popular, responses were, and that's part of what gets shared out in February in the summary to Councilmember Joe, and she can read that out to the council. So like, hopefully not doing too much more legwork besides reading comments. If anybody enjoys that particularly. Something to say, you've at least given an opportunity to express it that's different than what they may have had before. We have information that says we've addressed this on the council end, we've addressed this on the public end. Here's what people are saying to the people that we've reached.
Yeah, I just think we have to, as a board, meet people where they're at, because they may not come in here, they may not go to City Hall, they may not. So if they can give us a comment that can help us grow as a board and help the community by putting comments there, I mean, I'm all for it. Because I think we're making a lot of plans of how to negate stuff that just hasn't happened yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't have 200 comments yet, but we're already trying to think about the amount of work before. You get what I'm saying? That's
There's 10 of us.
We're about to, okay, we're about to turn it up with the info.
But also keep in mind that those comments aren't necessarily meant to be actionable by us.
Right.
But those
But
are
at least
official public
engagement.
comments that we do.
Right.
So,
That's true.
Sorry.
Just one question, is there interest, considering that Councilmember Jones spoke specifically about like 5 points? Is there interest in trying to reach out to individuals, organizations, and businesses that may be impacted to share public comment?
I think this one in particular is hard because, I mean, when's the last time you really sat down and thought about the noise ordinance? When you heard a noise?
Never.
I mean, yeah, probably, prior to that, you know, you've got one or two opinions on it. It's either, wow, that was too loud, which over on our side of town, with, you know, the concert that was held at Dick's, had a lot of people complaining about the noise. I actually thought it was kind of cool. It happened one weekend out of the year. Oh my. But there, you know, it's one of those things, and this is one that if it is in an isolated area, I'm not certain it's not better to be handled in the isolated area. I mean, I know it's a tricky thing to do because it's how loud is too loud, you know, is it on the meter, is it by the ear, is it, you know, who's it bothering, you know, what else would bother them? I mean, you know, this one is really tricky. I don't know that I would reach out to anyone because I think anybody you know, if we were to go around the room and go, what's your opinion on noise ordinance? I mean, I think we could all come up with an opinion, but do we really have one before we were asked? I think not, you know?
I think I'm raising it as a moment of lifting up the lived experience, right?
Yeah.
When I lived in Peace Raleigh above Publix, right behind Glenwood South, I thought about the noise ordinance.
Right.
Time I would know. Right, and so there's like a level of tolerance. I think specifically 5 points is a wonderment to me. I don't know how people that want quiet family lives even live over there in a real, you know. And so I think that that's part of my curiosity is like, what is the community doing? And so I don't know if it wants to be an board action, but that's just sort of the inquiry that is coming to me is like, what is the actual experience and is it different, you know, like in terms of what tolerance is it because we've been dealing with this for 25 years and there's never been anything done about it? And then the flip side of it is the fact that we're looking at a policy change that will affect everybody in terms of enforcement. It does not matter if you're in 5 points or in a different place, you're going to be affected by it. So individuals who are less desirable in certain neighborhoods and prone to be the targets of their neighbors in terms of how they want to control them and be a certain type of way will end up kind of moving into that gray area. And so that's my real concern sort of about the impact of the decision and why it feels for me wanting to get a large outside of those problem areas as well as those places and spaces where I just don't have a concept of what it's like to live under that duress.
So,
I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop you because we have about 4 seconds left into the meeting. Before we adjourn, is there any other pressing issue event that anybody wants to share publicly, or you can email them to me and I'll make sure while we're in the room, there's nothing highly important. Okay, with that, I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn and then we can discuss anything else when we do that's not official business that we're moving on. Yeah, let's make our first motion.
Okay.
It was a question. It's official and it's second by Anthony. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Perfect.